Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Well, welcome. Let's go around and say our names, introduce ourselves. And if you're here for the first time, would you let us know so we give you a special welcome? My name's Paul.
Douglas. Bob. Darren. Mabu.
David. Patrick. Todd. Rami.
Baruch.
Daniel.
Roland.
Joe.
I'm Scott.
Brad.
Marvin.
David. Joe.
David.
Paul.
Lauren. I'm here for the first time.
Rick.
I'm Howard.
Harley.
Peter.
Paul. This is my first time.
Jack.
Larry.
Jim. Arthur.
Tara. Peter.
Alan.
Jim.
Tom.
Bill.
Okay, we welcome back Kirsten DeLeo, who's a longtime student of the Tibetan masters, Sogyal Rinpoche, author of the classical bestseller, The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and she's a senior educator in Rigpa's spiritual care program. She organizes and co-facilitates hospice and nursing home volunteer training, as well as workshops for the medical professionals and the public on healing, aging, illness, bereavement, and death and dying. She has volunteered at the Zen hospice and at the Maitri in San Francisco for many years and is trained in the Hakomi method of psychotherapy. Thank you, Kristen.
So good morning. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me back, Paul and Steve. So last time I talked a little bit about the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And when Steve called this week, oh, what are you going to talk about this week? I had no idea. I thought, okay. And then I thought, Tuesday is Tibetan Losar, this is the Tibetan New Year. And usually on Monday, tomorrow, you spend all day house cleaning and really decluttering and just to start the new year fresh. And I thought maybe a good idea is to introduce a practice that maybe some of you, as I've heard, are already familiar with. But just really nourishing ourselves to start the new year is the practice of loving kindness. And I know some of you get together regularly once a week to do it together. Can you just signal who's in this group? Yeah, great. Who's familiar with this practice of loving kindness, also maybe under the name metta practice? Yeah, great. So for those of you who are familiar with the practice, just take it as a refresher, as an inspiration. Maybe there's something new, probably everything going to sound very familiar. So I'm going to introduce the practice, and then we're going to do the practice, and then at the end, a little bit of time to exchange, have a little discussion, share some insights, and maybe you would like to share what you've learned if you've done it for a longer period of time, because then is actually when the power of the practice really manifests. And so the practice of loving kindness, or called metta practice, comes from the Buddha, and metta means loving kindness in Pali. You might have also heard it in the Sanskrit term of Maitri. That's a reason why there is this Maitri at the Castro, the residential care facility. So it actually means loving kindness. And the teachers, the Buddhist teachers who came to the West really realized after looking at our students, we really need that practice, because it's really such a wonderful antidote to our self-doubts, continuous self-criticism, and we were sometimes our worst enemies. And this practice really is a good antidote. And interestingly enough, the Buddha has taught this practice as an antidote to fear, not as an antidote to self-doubt or our own judgment, self-loathing, self-hatred. And the Buddha taught this practice to first to a group of monks, and he sent a group of monks when he was in the near his birthplace. He sent a group of young monks into the forest and asked them to practice. And the monks just said, okay, went to the forest. But it turns out the forest was inhabited by tree spirits, very ferocious creatures, very scary creatures, and they came up with all kind of nightmarish visions for the monk to scare them away. And the monks, certainly enough, despite their meditation practice, ran away and said, no, we're not going to go back there. And so the Buddha taught them the practice of loving kindness, the practice of metta, as an antidote to fear, and sent them back to the forest. Said, yes, I will give you this practice, but you have to go back and practice this practice. So they went back to this forest, can imagine a bit scared, but their practices kept practicing this practice. And the tree spirits realized, there's such a loving environment, that finally had to give up and resolve to care for the monks. So it just comes to tell that it's kind of a very classic story of when we practice this practice, it's not only good for ourselves, but really creates such a good environment. And so the basic principle of loving kindness practice is that we all want to be happy and be free of suffering. I mean, that's a common human goal, right? We all share. And it's just a question, how do we go about it? And most of the time we're not as skillful as we could be. In loving kindness practice reconnects us with the source within us. It's not something that we think, I'm pretending to be loving and kind. I'm pretending to be good. It's rather, it uncovers that we are inherently good and kind. So it's really connecting with our inner core being, which you also kind of call Buddha nature, or whatever we call it. That in fundamental goodness we all have that. Some one teacher calls it our basic sanity, that's always there. So it's not trying to create something, trying to fabricate something that's not there. It's rather tapping into a source that's already there. And maybe as some of you who know has been starting to practice a practice, that a lot of resistance can come up, because what you do in this practice, you start out with yourself first. That's the starting place. And you work with the phrases of, very simple phrases, may I be happy, may I be well. And you just sit with these phrases and repeat these phrases. Like as you would sit in meditation practice, coming back to your breath, you use these phrases, may I be happy, may I be well. And Sogyal Rinpoche, my teacher, also adds, may I be safe. Because he felt like this is also needed sometimes for us living in the West. So may I be happy, may I be well, may I be safe. And then when you start repeating these phrases to yourself and allowing to really thinking that may I be really happy, may I be really well, you can already feel, there might be some resistance coming up. It's not how we are being taught, it's not how we've been brought up, of really acknowledging this is what we all deserve, what I deserve. So a lot of times strong resistance comes up with that practice initially. A lot of old stuff, old or new stuff, yeah. And so this practice is actually wonderful because it really creates a safe space for all these feelings to come up, to allow them to be there, but not to indulge in them and being carried away with them, nor suppressing them, because we usually have the tendency to do either or. We either indulge in things and think I'm a terrible person, or we just suppress them and put them away and shove them away and don't look at them. So it's really creating an environment to all these various feelings to be there without actually identifying with them. This is not who we are. The same thing we do in basic shamatha practice and basic tranquility meditation, to really be present with what is without going after them. It's like we are not going to turn. There's one wonderful example. Like often when you sit in maybe a lot of time when we sit in meditation practice, it's so easy to follow our thoughts, and the half hour is gone, right? And you wonder, I've been so distracted, and then you hear the bells, and oops, what happened, And it's like, imagine you are the doorman at a hotel, and you would follow each hotel guest out of the door, So, but we stay at the door. Yeah? So it's really so with this practice. Like in shamatha practice, we can come back to these phrases over and over again, and also, so even if when you sit down and do this practice, this morning, you might say, well, nothing is really happening. I don't really particularly feel very loving and kind this morning. I might feel angry or tired or whatever. Sometimes when you do this practice over a long period of time, which is actually traditionally being recommended, you do this practice for half an hour over and over again. And just to sit with that practice for half an hour, you might think, oh, that's very boring. It is boring. It's a very basic practice, but it's really to trust the power of the practice. There's a wonderful story by Sharon Salzberg. Maybe you probably are familiar with Sharon Salzberg. She wrote this book, Loving Kindness, The Revolutionary Art of Happiness. I really highly recommend it. And there she describes when she first started out learning this practice. So she was given this practice by her teacher, and she was sitting down doing it for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, she said, I got up and nothing has happened. I thought, I was just bored. It's a waste of time. I was sitting there for 2 weeks. Nothing happened. And then I think she dropped her teacup, and the teacup broke. And her first reaction was, oh, you are a klutz, but I love you anyway. And he said, I never would have thought that way before. To acknowledge, I'm awkward, I'm a klutz, but I love you anyway. To say that to myself, to even think that, So it's very subtle. It's not these dramatic, big insights, And in Buddhism, we know the approaches with bodhicitta, the heart essence of enlightened mind, that we practice for the benefit of all beings. That not only we are free from suffering and attain ultimate happiness, but all beings. But all beings, that's pretty big. And all beings often is very abstract. Who are all these beings out there? All sentient beings, not even humans, all the beings we cannot even see, animals, all the creatures. But all often also has the tendency to turn into nothing. When we say, especially when we do, I don't know if you do it when you sit down and do your practice at home or here, when you do motivation prayer in the beginning to motivate you, to come into that spirit, may all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. That's why I do this practice. But all often becomes meaningless, at least, I don't know, sometimes for me, like, who are these all beings, So it's also to give it meaning, so that we really, it's a very skillful practice to develop from the basic love we all have to make it more and more boundless, make it more and more immeasurable, as it says. so that we are actually able to extend it outward further and further and make it meaningful. And coming from a very healthy place instead of I should be loving, I should be kind, but really coming from a much more stable place, that we start with ourselves. Because the Buddha taught that the person who is, we have to be able to love ourselves, because then if we would do so, we would not even think of harming any other person. That's where non-violence and non-harming comes in, with starting to love ourselves deeply. So the way Sogyal Rinpoche teaches this practice has an additional element you might not find in the other traditions of Buddhism. He starts with an invocation, and that's very common in Tibetan Buddhism and Vajrayana practice. You start with an invocation, and the idea is that you visualize in the sky in front of you an enlightened being. So that could be your master, it could be a Buddha, a bodhisattva, or any other enlightened being you have a heart connection to. That could be, for a Christian practitioner, it could be Jesus or Mary. So you just see what's for you the connection that opens to you up, that really opens your heart. And sometimes it's hard for us to visualize, kind of to really think there is something there. Another way of doing that skillfully is to visualize in the sky in front of you just pure light as the embodiment of wisdom and compassion. But the main point is really to invoke a presence, that you really feel there is a presence here with me that is really embodies unconditional love and is unbiased, and it just loves me as the way I am. And then I know that's for sometimes it's difficult to think, this is outside of myself. So when I invoke an entity that's outside of myself. But the principle of invocation is actually an evocation. I evoke in myself something, and it's actually in me. So the invocation is only a mirror of what I have inside already, which is most of the time fairly clouded, and I'm not aware of it. But so it's not something outside of myself, like an authority figure. It's not separate. It doesn't come from that dualistic understanding. So if you haven't tried it with an invocation, just try it out today when we do the practice. And if you have difficulty with it, just drop it and come through to the phrases, and I will tell you how that works later on. The other thing is to do this practice actually for a considerable length of time. Maybe some of you have started the practice. It's easy to skip it, and then because in the practice you start with yourself, extending loving kindness to yourself. Then you move on what is called a benefactor, somebody you respect very highly, somebody who's really offered you a lot of kindness throughout your life, who has been very generous to you, somebody you really deeply respect. That's called the benefactor. And then you move on to a good friend, to somebody you don't like so much, or somebody you don't know, you're indifferent to, and somebody just like, and then you open up slowly to all beings. So that's the progression of the practice. And when you sit down and do it, let's say for 2-3 weeks, every morning, half an hour, extend loving kindness towards yourself, there might be the time when you start feeling, I just want to get on with it, I'm okay, it's rather selfish sitting here every morning for half an hour, extending loving kindness to myself. So all these thoughts will come up, I promise you. and you just get very antsy on your cushion and said, okay, can I just move on to someone else, somebody else? And that's the point where we really just recognize and bring awareness to your thoughts. Kind of, and even and this is another layer that we are kind of being unraveled, that our inability to really be kind to ourselves, that we are actually worthy of the same love we try to extend to other people when we're about to help them, you know. So each of us, I'm worthy of it, and that's feeling of worthiness. This comes in when we are loving somebody. We always think the person is worthy, and we are worthy in the same way anybody else is. To stick with that, to work through that resistance and extend the same loving kindness to it, and not to say, I should not be feeling this way, or feel embarrassed or guilty. Yeah. So it's a lot of stuff comes up, and so you might be really surprised, all the layers. It's like peeling an onion, all the layers being, all the edges we have, you know, all the sense of feeling uncomfortable, not lovable, not good enough, not tall enough, not beautiful enough, whatever it is. So it's not a practice that boosts in a way. It's not a New Age practice. It's Buddha taught it 2,500 years ago. It's not that you boost your self-confidence, your ego is being bolstered up, you know, and you patch it up and you look good. It's not like I'm grand and beautiful and wonderful, you know. The intention is I do this practice to unblock the fundamental intrinsic goodness in order to then extend it out. I don't do this practice in order to protect myself, you know, to be territorial, to say, well, I do this because I want to feel safe in my little box, you know, for the ego. It's actually chipping away at our ego, this egotistical attitude. It's quite a sneaky practice, comes from behind, you know. So the really important is that we learn to feel that we are fundamentally, basically worthy of love. You know, who, if not we, would love? You know, we have to love ourselves. There's nobody usually out there. We have to start first and foremost with ourselves. One way of entering in is when you start beginning this practice, is to recall a moment, a time, a situation where we actually did something very good, where you were, but maybe when you helped somebody, when you felt your mind very spacious, or remember some of your really good qualities, you know. Just for a moment, remember your good qualities, at least one or two. Yeah? Just be creative. You can play with that when you sit down. Oh, I'm actually not that bad of a person, you know. Without being arrogant. So
That's a good question.
yeah.
You know, when I think of what a lot of our practices are doing here, it's to quiet the mind. If we quiet the mind, we be at peace, so we have everything we need. And I guess I'm trying to understand the way this fits in. I guess it's like ego and attachment. This is kind of a way to kind of break it down so we can find that peace that's within us. Am I understanding that?
Yes.
Right?
The way you can use this practice, and have you done it before?
No.
Maybe we do it, and then you get a sense of what it actually is about, and you stop talking about it. Yeah. You can use it when you say you practice every day, meditation practice, or however often you do it. You can use this form of practice in the beginning to really cut your stories. You know, often when we sit in meditation, these waves come, right? Waves of thoughts and emotions. And so we are kind of often entangled in our own stories. And this is the way, when you do this practice in the beginning, may I be happy, may I be well, just using these phrases, you will see you will soften a little bit. Just even melt a little bit. Your heart gets a bit more open, and then you can actually sit. It gets a bit more easier. You can play with it. But let's do the practice, yeah? And but before we do it practice, I want to say a little bit about it, because what we're going to do it, the way we're going to do it now, we're going to do it with ourselves. And the practice of extending loving kindness for oneself is usually being done in retreat quite extensively for 2 up to 3 weeks or longer. So today I didn't want to kind of skip that and then go immediately to the benefactor, and from the benefactor and extend it out. So to really stay with that. So when you then further along have a good stable ground for this practice, then you move on to the benefactor, somebody you respect very much. You could choose a master, somebody, maybe, and it would be also good to choose somebody who's alive. Because maybe if you choose someone who has died, then maybe feelings of grief come up in other things. So just to choose somebody who's still alive, you feel a connection, you have a connection with, that somebody inspires you. Then the next phase is a good friend, and there you can also see what is actually the real quality of friendship. Yeah. And also the traditional advice is, don't use somebody you're sexually attracted to, because then desire and greed and hope and fear come in. Yeah. But if you happen to notice while you're doing this practice, oops, I chose that very person I'm attracted to, then again, instead of beating yourself up, you said, let's just use it as an experiment, just to see bring awareness to it, and see, because you can really purify and transform all these other feelings, the desire or attractiveness to that person, through loving kindness too. So because often, when I'm desirous of somebody, I want something from that person. It's actually about me. It's not about the other person. So again, it's a way of transforming it, and then to work with that too. So may you be happy, may you be well, may you be safe, regardless if you love me or like me or find me attractive too, like me back. Then maybe also sometimes when you do it with a good friend, jealousy might come up, envy. Maybe the person even looks better than you are, or has more, drives a sportier car, I don't know. Whatever makes you envious and jealous, or maybe it's a smart person that gets me people are so high, So just then again, you can work with that, just so that you really come to that place where you wholeheartedly can extend that loving kindness to that person, and then you already get a sense you can actually expand it. From there, you choose somebody you're indifferent to, somebody you either don't know very well, the cashier at your grocery store you see every morning, or somebody in this group you don't know very well, you don't even know this person's name, but you can use that person too. So it moves from, so you develop that closeness slowly, you can see, to more and more people. And then you pick a person you don't like. It's usually called an enemy, but enemies might be big. And you also don't start out with choosing somebody who has really hurt you deeply in the beginning. Choose somebody who simply, there are so many people who press our buttons, who irritate you, right? So just choose such a person. You will find somebody, right? And work with that person. Work with that. And then you see, you kind of, because again, the enemy is used because anger, the feelings of anger and hatred are the enemies to loving kindness. That's what the Buddha said. These feelings are really the feelings that block us. So let's just do this practice. And you can see at the end, then you extend it to all beings. So let's do this practice for ourselves. And if you like, you can close your eyes during this practice. Make yourself comfortable. And we're not going to do it for half an hour for the time, but at least to give you a sense, I will guide it, and It will be about 10 to 15 minutes, and I will do it with an invocation in the beginning just to give you a sense of how you could do it at home. So take a moment to settle all your scattered aspects, like the mud in the muddy glass of water. Let the mud just sink down to the bottom. Let all the scattered aspects slowly sink down to the bottom. And let the clarity of the water, the clarity of your mind can shine through. And return to your breath, to your in-breath and to your out-breath. And take a moment to establish your motivation in a way that you not only doing this practice right now for yourself, but ultimately for the benefit of all beings you come in contact with, or all beings you haven't even met yet. And now visualize in the sky in front of you the embodiment of wisdom and compassion in whatever way it's true for you. So it could be the Buddha or Bodhisattva. Or simply white light that represents wisdom and compassion, infinite love. And really feel that presence. And the presence is sending you love unconditionally and wholeheartedly. And slowly opens your heart. And if there are any traces of hard-heartedness or resistance, it's just being enveloped by this love as well. So this love that you receive is completely universal and unconditional. And take a moment to really fully receive this love. Allow to let it permeate your entire being. And if there is an old barrier or wound or hurt, just let it melt away like a thin layer of ice, warming and nourishing your heart. And as you feel more open now, more ready to receive, you can begin to repeat these phrases to yourself, silently and in your own time. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be well. So just continue doing this, saying these phrases silently to yourself. And whenever you get distracted, like in meditation, you come back to your breath and to these phrases. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be well. And as you repeat these phrases, may I be happy, may I be well, might get a growing sense that this love you receive is actually not coming from anywhere outside of yourself, but deep from within yourself. May I be happy. May I be well. And may I be safe. May I be happy. May I be well. So now slowly let go of the visualization and allow yourself to really rest in this atmosphere of loving kindness. And if it was very difficult, just consider that it is available to you. Just rest for a moment in meditation. And as we conclude this practice that's dedicated to all sentient beings, to really widen the circle, that they may be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, and enjoy happiness and the ultimate happiness. So just open your eyes and return to the room. Get a sense of, even if it's sometimes very hard to allow ourselves to do that. So whenever, and maybe today, the rest of the Sunday, this very foggy Sunday, or the rest of the week, whenever you catch yourself thinking something negatively about yourself, why not repeating the phrase, may I be happy, may I be well? Instead of thinking, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. Or when you walk down the street, you can extend that to the person you meet, all the people you see on Muni, for instance. Yeah? So it's a very, very beautiful, very simple, but nevertheless very profound practice. Yeah. So I want to give you a chance if you have any questions or any insights you want to share with a larger group.
When I learned
learned it on a retreat with Spirit Rock with Carol. Well, actually, yeah, it's Carol Wilson and James Barris was the teacher. But Carol Wilson was doing the meditation, and she actually began by giving metta to somebody we were close to, then to someone we were indifferent to, and then the last one, and I was just full of, it was a couple days into the retreat, and I was just full of loving kindness, and then she said, do it to yourself, and I felt I'd been tricked, because I think for me, I think for a lot of us, it's very foreign to give as much loving kindness to, say, a parent, to feel that loving kindness as to ourselves. And that really struck me, I mean, I really thought that she's playing some trick on us, because how are we supposed to love ourselves with that much love? And I realized how screwed up it is not to be able to do that, But it's still a tricky practice for me. It's not as difficult as it was, but especially for self, it's very hard for me to give it out. But it's probably a lot easier than it was, but it's still. Sometimes I think that's the hardest part of the practice.
It is.
Yes, thank you very much. That's been great. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it was so obvious to Eastern teachers that we're all afflicted with harshness towards ourselves?
I give you a story. When His Holiness first came to the West, and he didn't speak English very well, and then some Westerners were talking to him, and they used the term self-hatred. And the Tibetan translator was really struggling kind of to translate it into Tibetan. And His Holiness didn't understand it. He asked a few times, what? And he couldn't understand the notion that you hate yourself. And he said, you're supposed to love yourself. So I don't know, maybe we are just screwed up, or I don't know. I mean, probably each one of us has a personal answer to that one, But again, it's not another thing of beating ourselves up. Yeah? Just don't use that, Yeah.
I think certain humor in our culture taps into some underlying themes, and certainly if you've seen Stuart Smalley on Saturday Night Live, he's sort of universally pathetic and despised. And he has a little mantra, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. And he says it to himself in the mirror. And it's kind of, this reminds me of that a little bit.
And maybe the motivation is slightly different, I wouldn't question it. But it's because it can easily trick you into another self-help tool. You get in the border book section, on the self-help, Dr. Phil, But it's really much profounder than this, and this is the reason why it's really tricky. It's much easier to bolster your ego and make you feel good for yourself, at least for a week. But it's much trickier to feel good about yourself. I'm actually inherently good, period. I have Buddha nature, period. That's much harder to really live that, And I'm doing it, and I'm actually want to be happy and want to be free of suffering. And that in itself is actually a good quality. It's a value. And this is the reason why I'm on the spiritual path. This is the reason why I'm in the Sangha. Right? And we're all on that path. So it's not anything bad. Question?
I just had a bit of a reflection. When I would call this my spiritual renaissance, it began probably about the beginning of 2002. I ran across a Brazilian woman who was a mystic, I'll call her. She read my palms, and She said basically a lot of what you said, and she drew all this out on paper, and there was lots of terminology I didn't understand, but one of the things that she said was that she said, I see you have a tremendous capacity to bring help and healing to the world. But she said you'll never accomplish that until you work on yourself. And basically the same sort of thing, and I kind of thought it was unique to what she was reading from my poems or what she read to me. And it took me a while of experiences and, meditation and various things before I came to fully understand what that meant, which largely helped me to embrace the meditation. But I just at the time I was like, wow. And I really didn't fully understand what she meant. But over time it came to me.
It takes time. It's not, thank you.
One idea is that so much negativity is dumped on most American children when they're very young. Do this, do that, oh, you're bad, don't do this, don't do that. It's so confusing that they can't help but feel that there's something wrong with them, that it's negative, and that somehow they're bad. As a matter of fact, that's a word that's frequently used. You're bad, you're bad. And then they start treating each other in bad ways very early on, 2, 3 years old. They've just already adopted the cultural notions that television is just full of it. They're parked in front of TV and they get all of these terrible ideas and can't help but feel bad about themselves.
And, if on the other side of it, to remember really, I hope everyone in our life, we have a person who really can see us for who we are. How powerful it is when somebody sees you for who you are, sees your inherent goodness, sees you. You're up,
loves you. How many parents genuinely love their children unconditionally?
Or even sometimes it's actually strangers, because I work in hospice, and I mean, I don't know these people, they don't know me, but there's still this quality of love that beyond I know you or we have a history together, I'm supposed to love you because I'm your mother. I'm not, beyond these roles, and there is something basic humanity.
Which is why so many of us come here.
Right, yeah. Just but to really, and how liberating it is to be seen that way. Right? To see that, because if I see that inherent goodness, at least at times in myself, I'm able to see it more in other people, too, Yeah.
Is there one more question?
I'm just relating to that. I think it's like, when you look at a baby, you think, how perfect and pure. Yeah, like, at what point does that baby become like a bad thing?
It starts screaming.
It's like extending that out. Like I think of my little nephew. He's 5. It's so easy to love him, even when he's like throwing a tantrum. You're like, he's just a little kid. He doesn't know any better. Just a little bit older. We should close now.
Okay, good.
Are you available to stick
Yeah,
around?
yeah, I'm here. Okay, thank you.
Any announcements?
I'm Cass. I'm your host today. Invite you to stay afterwards and enjoy the fellowship in the Sangha. There will be tea and refreshments. If you have tea, please wash it up. There's a sign-up sheet for people who would like to be added to the newsletter list or join the league. It's over by the Donna Bowl, speaking English. To help meet the expenses of the Sangha, we suggest that you make as generous a donation as you can to pay our expenses. I think that's all.
Okay. What's the email address, Todd, for the directory?
GBF mailing list at sbcglobal.net.
Okay. GBF mailing list at sbcglobal.net. Todd's
compiling data for a hard copy directory. So to that address, you want to send your name, your land address, your phone number, your email address, and if you provide a service, if you're, an electrician or a massage therapist or whatever, and you want to list your service, then put that in there too, and maybe a word or two describing it. They're not meant to be yellow pages, just a description. And I was thinking, I forgot to put it in the last newsletter. I think it'd be good to run it in a couple of newsletters. So if it ran in the April one and the June one, we could have it out around July maybe. So, yeah.
Lee Robbins is having a hip replacement operation Monday. So California Pacific Hospital. And his cell phone number is 713-1341. So maybe people like to call him or see him.
Okay, and next Sunday is Oscar Awards, and it's a huge year for LGBT with Brokeback Mountain and Transamerica and Capote. So I'm hosting a potluck for people who want to come over and watch the awards, and hopefully there'll be one or two moments of celebration for the LGBT community. I live in Oakland off of Piedmont Avenue, and I didn't bring a flyer, but you can ask me, and I'm putting it on the email cluster group. I did once, and I'll do it again next week. The awards are from 5 to 8, so I'm welcoming people at 4:30 to start assembling. Is that it for announcements? Okay, Kirsten, would you lead us in a closing? Would you be able to do that?
Yeah.
Or dedication of marriage?
How do you? Last time you had a circle. I don't know.
Yeah, we do a circle.
Yeah, we'll do that again. So just take a moment, if you like, if you wish, close your eyes. And really acknowledge that you're inherently lovable, you're worthy, unlike everybody else in this room. And let's dedicate this morning to all the people you're going to come in contact with today, the rest of the week, and the rest of the new year. May they be free from anxiety and hope and fear, and find a peace of mind. May they be free from all suffering and enjoy true happiness.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.